hear me and see my screen? If you can let me know through the microphone or the chat feature, it would be fine.
Yes, I started the recording.
Excellent. I'm glad that you can hear. Can you see the screen? Excellent. Thank you very much. All right. If you can see the screen, then we'll begin. Yes. I can't hear you.
Oh, you can you hear us?
Um, you can hear me. You can see the screen, but I can't hear you. um, that's wonderful for this morning. So we'll go around on this again. You all can hear me and you all can hear my screen. Am I correct? Good. But I can't hear you. And I'm not too sure why all that is happening because I've got a full day with all of these classes as to why this isn't working. I can't hear you.
Lucas, you can hear me, right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, Lucas is there and Devin's there, and I can't hear you, and I'm not sure why. I could keep working on this to see. Hang on for just a second. Let me get into this system, and I'm going to try this. All right. Now go ahead and
Can you hear us?
I can hear you now.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, today I'm going to have to leave about 9:35 because they've scheduled a strategic planning, and it's right in between the classes, and it's I schedule all these way in advance, and then they give me that, but we'll make it work for us. So today, then we'll go through the brief updates, and then I'll move into my part of Tanzimat. I think I can do that in the time we have. I'll do the constructs first, just for a review, because I think both of you know the constructs from last semester. So everything seems to be moving along. I've read the papers, and I got all the exams back to everyone. Students did very well on those, so I think we're doing okay. Week 6, Module 6, Tanzimat. I've got some really good readings in there, the good, tremendous podcast, and I've got that media material from Tel Aviv University, and I was lucky to get a hold of that. So there's a couple of those for you to watch. So that should give you a great insight into Tanzimat, because it's really important as to what's happening. The activity that I have for you today, so we're kind of, the content's kind of moving forward a little bit and challenging for us, is to look for some articles between 1839 and 1876 when we get Abdul Hamid II. He's really the last Ottoman Sultan that's got extreme power. To find some articles about Tanzimat, kind of read through the articles and then pick one and then talk about the reform movements, because this Tanzimat, and then there's Hadi Sharif and Hadi Humayun that all roll through this idea of transformation. And why this is important: this is the only civilization that tried to beat the contacts that it had from the outside by leaping ahead of them. The remnants of that today isn't in the former Ottoman Empire. It's in what we call Old Persia, but it's in Iran, and most people have no idea why. Iran wants to get all this nuclear capacity so that she can either move against other countries, but part of it is they view that as the way of survival. They picked it up from what the Ottomans tried, is that you um, whatever your neighbors have or your enemies have in technology or anything, you need to move far beyond it to make sure that you become the leader, and that they in a sense, follow you, or they move away from you and let you exist. Now, that may or may not be what they're doing, but I'll try to get into that aspect of it today so you can see. So that's what you're going to do for the web activities. Then this Friday, I think the link is in there to submit um, your work with these constructs. So what I'll do is, if you have any questions now, if you don't, then I'll just walk through the constructs for you again, and then I want to get into the my part of Tanzimat, which is this period of reform, but it's more of a transformation where the empire basically figured out that because we're not expanding anymore and because of all these pressures, the idea to attain the abode of peace may not be possible because the abode of war is coming. So, what we can do then is move beyond where they are. And so the pressure is, well, you have slaves and you discriminate and certain things for Muslims, certain things for non-Muslims. And what they're going to do is they're going to brush all away and leap way to the front. And it almost works. Of all civilizations, it just about worked. Um, and I'll get into it much more as to why it didn't work. All right. What questions do you have at this point? Anything I can go over for you? Okay. That's good. Anything comes up, just interrupt me, send me an email, meet and collaborate, whatever you need. We can do that. All right. Let me then get into these constructs again a little bit so you know what they are. There's three super constructs. These are tools that we use to explain why certain things may or may not be happening. They're also engines. They pull and push history in different directions. So, if we want to look at nation states or tribal groups or any form of civilization, they generally revolve around these here. And the first one is order and stability. Um, and that's what all civilizations, all empires, no matter what system of government or structure they use, is they strive for this because if they can't, then they have disorder and instability and nothing works. They become vulnerable to being taken over, dominated, and exploited by others. And so the question is, how far do we expand and how far do we move about with the ideas and concepts we have? Part of it is the Ottomans weren't, in a sense, selling anything. They weren't selling a decentralized system. Lots of European countries and early civilizations began a decentralized system and fought to maintain it. And over time, it was destroyed. And then they went to a centralized system. Germany from 300 states down to one, Italy, multiple republics, and down to 1870 unification. Japan, multiple feudal domains and estates where they couldn't get into too much trouble because the feudal states were too small. So they one or two would beat up on each other for a while, then stop because they'd have lose too many men, too many resources. But when you put them all together and you unify them, you saw what happened between 1937 and 1945 and post 45. So they went completely away from what they had before, um, bridging that to what they had before, not possible. So you have to find out what kind of order and stability exists in your document. And most of the time, if you have a document prior to 1922, it's going to be what we talked about last week. It's going to be Ottomanism or the imperial system. Then what you need to look at is transition of power, who the key leader is at the time of your document, how did that person get there, and what happened to them. Okay, pretty straightforward. And the third one, when you read your document, many of you already turned those in, and I've looked at the questions 1 and 2. What are the expectations? Why did they write it? What are they expecting? Um, when they write up, the Young Turks write, and they come up with a list of these. What are they expecting these to be adopted? They're expecting change. And I wonder through human history, everybody talks about change, and nobody says, "Well, you make a change. What does it cost us? What does it cost the next generations down?" And that's what the questions the Ottoman asked. They don't want any of that. The feudal system in Japan didn't want any of it. The small German states didn't want any of it, and many of the smaller republics in Italy didn't want any of it either. But they were forced into an amalgamation, and as a result, look at them today, where they are. Um, Germany economically, but the other two are not doing well economically. or socially. They've got major problems that they're not going to be able to reverse. All right, the major constructs, there's six. Any domination in your document, um, any exploitation in your document. You only pick two of these. Any glory. A lot of that is in feudal systems as well. Wealth, resources, human individuals doing work, oil, gas, land resources, agricultural resources, gold, silver. And wealth is in many different aspects. And what do they believe in? It's a little harder because they believe in different things. They may say one thing and then do something completely different. What is the belief system? You can see the ideology. Um, Probably more individuals have been killed over time because these smaller clusters of tribes, clans, whatever you want to call them, up to smaller empires, to bigger civilizations, have a belief system, and they're willing to eliminate people based on what they believe. And then when it's over, they're wondering, like, well, do we need to do that? Um, Six other key leaders, other than the person you talked about when you did question two. Many of these will be multiple key leaders, especially in Constantinople, the fall of Constantinople. There's many leaders there. Okay. Minor constructs, they all kind of work together: land, power, you know, competition, resources. So, is there any land? Yes. Ottoman land. You expand to a certain place and you stop. Question is, why do they stop? They could have expanded on. Expansionists were always pushing for expansion. Young warriors like to expand, just as Spain expanded in the New World and got into Mexico, Latin America, South America, California, land expansion, the warrior, the groups, the Dons, all you can see that they expand generally for land. Okay. And then without any power, you can't go anywhere. You have to achieve that. And civilizations have done that. And then once you get the power, you can exercise control over people, control over land, right? hmm Competition. Main thing is to cut off your competition, get enough power to control the land, cut off your competition, maximize your own resources at the expense of others. And that's generally what happens. And that's what the Ottomans didn't like. You see, that's not, that's the abode of peace. Doesn't want to do that. Um, They're one of the few, if not the only, major civilization that did seek anything in the New World. The Dutch were there, sure. Everybody was really there, and the ones that said they weren't were, not telling you the whole story. They had little shipping interests and things like that as well. But the Ottomans weren't. They knew that that was going to create uh, um, a lot of difficulty, another abode of war, and they didn't want to do that. They knew where they were, and that's basically where they wanted to stay, like that. So competition is a big player. You remember that one. Resources, everybody competes for resources. Many of the wars and the conflicts are resource wars. Example, water, and then forests, uh, natural gas, all kinds of things. Now they're after all the lithiums, things like that, cornering the market on batteries. Um, and it just ebbs and flows like that. That's generally what happens is they seek the resources out, and there's oil, there's gold, silver. I think you have an idea what the resources are. And then the last one is there's what we call religious driving. Is there a religious aspect that's driving the people? What is it? What is there religion propelling them to do certain things? How important is the religion at the time of your document compared to uh, when it might have started? Okay. All right. So that gives you just a quick review of that. Now let me move into. I'm glad we've got the sound set up. Let me move into my part on Tanzimat for us today. Let's see. Hang on for a second, and we'll get that up. Okay. Okay. So I've got some good time to go through that. So what we end up with after we went into Medmed Ali last week is what we call Ottoman Commerce and capitulations. A capitulation is when the Ottomans decide that they will work with foreign countries or outside of the abode of peace. Um, they will set up certain um, situations. They call it capitulate. Okay, so they'll talk to the French, and the French want all these things, and the Ottomans will say, no, you can just do this. So you get a little enclave, and you can work on trade, you can work on shipping. So what happens is these are what the textbooks and people over time call them. Well, you're capitulating, you're giving in. So it's like your neighbor, wants to come over and decides he wants to take your whole backyard, and you say, we can't do that. I pay taxes and things on this, but the way it works out is like, well, maybe I can give you this strip along the driveway, and you can plant your flowers there, and you should be happy, and then just leave the rest of my backyard alone. We don't do anything with the little strip of ground over here, so why don't you do that? Okay, so that works for a while. And then 2 or 3 years later, well, I want to expand the garden. I want to come right up to your back door. Well, you can't do that. And so it's just, okay, you can come up to the backyard. It's another form of appeasement, but it's much slower. All right. So we have all of these things taking place uh, from you know you see time met Ali. So there's commerce and capitulations. What it is, they want to get into the trading network that the Ottomans have because they've been trading with the East. So what they want to do is set up trading relations. So it's the same thing you see foreign elements doing in China. We're carving up China. They're doing the same thing here. And China collapsed by 1911, 1912. The Ottomans will go on for 10 years, but they actually outlast them. They start much later, but they outlast them going into the 20th century. All right, so international trade is increasing. Once the New World is discovered, and there's a couple hundred years of that, then these countries are becoming wealthier. That's all the silver coming out of Mexico that's flowing back in from Mexico into Spain, shipping, people traveling, immigrants coming. There's a new world out there. Let's get out there and get as much of it as we can. And the Ottomans aren't buying any of it. Okay. So what we have in 1838, when we're into this Greek independence, you can see what the British were really interested in. Oh, sure. Do they want to help Greece? Well, sure. That wasn't the real reason. They'll tell you that. People write books about it, but the real reason was is they wanted to get a network close to setting up favorable trade relations with the Ottomans, because we're helping um, the Greeks, and they know we're there. They may be a little more open to working with us. We've got a big navy, and we could easily come and maybe take material away from them. And it's like, okay, so the Ottomans sense that, so they give them some favorable trading relations like that. These are trading conventions. So everybody wants trade. We want to sell things to you folks, but what they're going to do is basically destroy their ability to produce internally, uh, so that they don't produce anything. They will get to the point where they won't produce anything anymore because it costs too much. And those people will lose all those skills and talents they have, and they'll become very dependent on the West, and then they know they've got them. Okay. Other Europeans, the British pave the way. Other European countries come, and they get the same kind of scenario. They get the same kind of convention. So everybody's going to pile in there. So they start coming. So instead of a big tsunami, what they try to do is handle the wave as it comes in. This is a typical Ottoman, strategy, is that we can either fight them and maybe lose, or maybe beat them. But what we can do is kind of absorb them when they come in. Right. Okay. And so government monopolies are abolished. That's going to impact them. So it's like, all right, it's like in the United States, like we have a lot of companies in our early history. The time of Theodore Roosevelt had all these monopolies, and so what they're going to do is they're going to abolish these many of these monopolies, which means the Europeans, anybody can come in with cheaper goods, and it's going to have an impact because there's no protection for them, and they haven't cornered the market on it. So 1846 grain trade, a sharp increase in the Danubian provinces. So what they want to do is they want to sell uh, and trade the grain coming out of the Danube area to the Ottomans, which means they can get it to them faster, cheaper, quicker. And then the Ottomans will have grain coming out of Egypt and other areas that no one will really want. And so British exports to the Ottomans increase. That's what we see. Okay. And as a result of this idea of what we call Tanzimats, and I'm bumping up right next to them here, guilds decrease in the Ottoman Empire. Okay. And the guilds are the same you'll see in Belgium and other places. The guilds are these experts that can produce inlaid furniture, porcelains, gold and jewelry like you've never seen today. They're probably better. They were better here than they are today. We have machinery produce all that. These are individuals that are based on the great civilizations of the Tigris and Euphrates, and they work with materials and have skills in their hands and in their minds that nobody else has, and it'll be lost. Just as in China, if you go there, talk to them, ask them if they know anything about Peking knots, and they may, but they can't tie the day. They don't even know what they are in the fabrics and textiles. They're so small and they're so powerful, but when you see them, you say, "This is beautiful. Who did this?" The Chinese did it about the same time these guilds were being decreased. British influencing the region to end and abolish the slave trade. Okay, so they're going after them for that. And in 1880, the slave trade is banned in the empire. Like, wow, gone. So what we have is the West overcoming the East, is what happens. So capitalism, agriculture, science, technology, military techniques, and nationalism all starting to flow out there. It's like it's going to create an Ottoman Empire like Swiss cheese. Capitalism's going to come, new crops and seeds and new science, new technology, military techniques, nationalism. It's just it. If you would have been there and you see this coming in, it's one after another. The people were frightened like that. Coastal areas of the empire were becoming colonies of Western Europe. Wow. Isn't that what the Greeks did to Anatolia, to the Persians? And then, you know, first they were all those settlers, Greek and Persians, and people from the Mediterranean were there on the coastal areas of modern day Turkey, coastal areas of Anatolia. And the Persians, and the Greeks gave them a better deal, so they went over to the Greeks. And the Persians said, "Well, we've been protecting you all these years. You got to pay a little." "Oh, no, no, we're going with the Greeks because it's better. We don't. They'll do more for us and we pay less." It's the same thing. So now what they're doing is uh, what the Italian merchants wanted to do. They want to control the coastal areas of the Ottoman Empire. And that's the same thing they wanted to do during the Crusades. So now they're going to get it. Yeah, just a different way. They don't call it a crusade, but they're going to get it. They're going to get these coastal areas, which means if the Ottomans want to get trade out, they got to go through the European powers that are there. Of course, they'll take your trade goods, buy them at a reduced price, and then they'll sell them a much higher price. Right. Okay. The whole process that I just described is called capitulations. They capitulate to them to survive. Okay. The foreigners are receiving special privileges. Like, wow. Mm-hmm. So they're taking this all in. This is capitulations. And after they take it all in and said, we can beat them at this because what we're going to do is institute our reforms and we'll move beyond theirs and then point our fingers back toward them saying, see, you're not doing what we're doing. And that's the problem. And then what we'll do is we'll sweep over them and set up enclaves in their territories. We'll do that. So this is somewhat of a trap that they're by accepting these capitulations. Okay. Europeans intervening in the empire to help the Christians. So they say, okay, we can do one better like that. We'll help the Christians here. You see, all the Europeans are doing, and they're just not the major countries. It's Russia, it's the Austrians, it's the Hungarians, it's all over. Mostly Eastern Europeans that are doing this. Okay, so between 1839 and 1876, the Ottomans undertook a series of reforms to keep up with and move ahead of who? The individual nation states, other empires that are on their door. All right. So they wanted to see what they all were first. So they all came in small pieces. And so a 40-year period of reforms is known as Tanzimat. And I've got a lot of things in the module for this week for you to read and look at to talk about it. I've studied this part of it for a long time because I was really interested in that. It tells us a lot about the future, the way things are going to go. The idea of loosely confederated systems, I don't think are viable. Not at the present time. They're not. We're going further and further to dictatorial, like we see in China, we see in Russia, and we see in the others. Um, take, give us all your rights, and we'll take care of you. So don't worry about anything. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. And so you're controlled in many of these other countries, especially we see it in China, like that. Okay. Abdu Jid, 1839 to 1861, declares what we call Hati Sharif. That's imperial rescript. That's the name of what they're going to do to move forward. It's coming directly from the Sultan. The Sultans know what they want to try, and they're moving in that direction. And it'll all be, it's Hadi Sharif, Hati Humayun, and then, Tanzimat is this period of reform. So we're going to have different stages of this reform. Okay, what did it do? It changed the political life of the empire. They thought, all right, if we have to change to keep up with these, to keep the abode of peace, we'll do it. And we'll beat them at their own game. That's what they're going to do. Okay. What were the reforms? Okay. All right. Western education, we'll take it. Western manners, we'll take it. Secular outlook, we'll take it. Books, magazines, newspapers, we'll take them. And we'll inculcate them into the empire. We'll make them better, turn them back against them. That's what they'll do. All right. In order to get that going, okay, we're going to have patriotism. You have patriotism in your country, we're going to have patriotism here. That's really new to them. And because they're decentralized, just like people like their state, and you say, you go to football games, it's the two teams in your state or whatever it is, like that. So now they've got to move people toward being very patriotic toward Ottomanism. And they do. And people, they begin to warm to it because it's coming from their leaders. Okay. Individual rights outside of the group. And boy, that's a new one for them. You see, they had basically in their targeted areas, they had what they call as group. This group had certain rights, and you went over to another group, they didn't have those. Well, they didn't want them. Everybody's a little different. That's what you do in a confederated system, and generally people are happy. They can move to others. There's a lot of intermarriage and things like that. But by and large, it's the same thing. It's like Native American tribes. It's like in Australia. You see these. And then the other aspect of it is you see it in Scotland with these clans. And until they all get together, if one group unifies, like the English did, you could beat them because they just don't come together because they don't agree. It's like, well, why should we do that? So, individual rights outside of the group. That's relatively new to them. Well, we're going to do that too. Ottomanism, equality of all subjects. That's Herculean. Any of those countries coming into the Ottoman Empire have equality of all subjects? Give me a break. They don't. What are they doing? Ottomanism. Most people have no idea what that is, and you have to look at it. That's equality for all subjects. Everybody in the empire is going to be equal. That raises them up so high, then they can point their fingers back and say, well, you don't have that. We have it. How come you don't have it? You should learn from us. So this is what they're doing. Equality for all subjects. That means everybody. Okay. Capital punishment is taken outside the hands of the local governors. Okay, they had that because these are each area, each provincial area could determine what kind of punishments they wanted. So what they're doing is moving to a centralized system, saying if that's what those Europeans and all these folks in Eastern Europe have, boy, we're moving right there. So now they can't say that we have all this punishment out there because punishment is going capital punishment outside the hands of the local government of these governors. Okay. Well, in order to do that, what are we going to do? You see how we move to a centralized system. You know what a centralized system is? Bureaucracy. Okay. So we're going to have to hire a lot more people to make sure that everything runs smoothly so that we can survive these waves, these little tsunamis coming through. And away they go. Okay. Oh, wow. We're going to create some local assemblies. Do you have those? Yeah, you can ask the Russians. Do you have local assemblies? Mm-hmm. The Austrian Hungarians? Right. No, We fought a revolution here in 1776, got the Constitution, and then we fought the revolution, and we had a lot of local assemblies. So now the Ottomans say, okay, we'll have local assemblies. Do you have those? We'll modernize our laws much more than you've ever modernized laws. Okay, we'll modernize diplomacy more than you. Right? No laws or ordinances introduced without the approval of the Council of Ministers. What does that sound like? You ever hear of what we have Congress, House of Representatives? No laws or ordinances introduced without the approval of the Council of Ministers. Okay, how do you get to be a council minister? Well, you got to elect people. Oh, elect, how do they get there? They can appoint them? Wow. Standardization of weights and measures. I'll just give you a few more, and then I have to go to this other group where they'll be calling me on the phone or like this. I'd rather talk about this, but anyway, I have to do that. This is, we shouldn't put that in the tape, but it's okay. Standardization of weights and measures. It's not decentralized. This is standard. This is centralization. Okay. We're going to have postage stamps. Our postage system is going to be better than yours. It's going to be less expensive, and we're going to put individuals on these stamps just like we do today. Yeah, they're going to do that. Lending banks, okay? Banks will lend money to people. You do this. We'll even do it better, faster, quicker, cheaper. We can do it. Okay. All right. That's where I'll leave it off for today. I gave you a little insight. I really like talking about Tanzimat and reform because you can see an empire coming together and a boat of peace saying, okay, if that's what it's going to take, we can do it. We'll be the leader. We'll point to you. You stop pointing to us, and something happens. It doesn't happen quite that way. Okay. So thanks so much for coming, and I apologize.